All right, hello and welcome to this training. As you can see from the title, what we're going to be covering today is 5 lessons that will rewire your reality. And these 5 lessons have been taken out from my personal journal that I do every year about a week before my birthday and reflect on the year. And this year I wrote about 25 to 30 lessons, something like that. And I took out 5 of probably the most important ones and the most valuable ones and expanded on them so that you can derive some value from them as well. Now, with that being said, what we're going to be talking about today more specifically is first, obviously, the overview itself, the sacred suffering, the infinite expansion, the wealth paradox, the self-investment law, the value paradox, the review, and then your action items for the day or the next few days. So without further ado, let's get started and talk about the sacred suffering. So most people spend their entire lives trying to escape work. They're counting down to Friday. They dream about retirement. They fantasize about winning the lottery so that they can finally stop doing anything productive. And look, I get it. People have attached productivity and work to something negative. We've been sold this idea that work is the enemy, that comfort is the goal, and that once you make it, you can just kick back and relax forever. But what I wish someone had told me 10 years ago is that the whole framework is completely backwards. The ability to work is actually one of the most profound blessings you'll ever experience in your life. And I'm talking about real work here, right? The kind that challenges you, pushes you, makes you question whether you can actually pull it off. When you strip everything else away, when you actually look at what actually makes life feel meaningful and alive, it's the struggle itself. You need something to push against, something that demands your full attention and effort. And there's this feeling you get when you're deep in the process of building something, creating something, solving a hard problem. Your brain is firing basically on all cylinders and time kind of disappears. And even though you're exhausted, you feel more alive than you do when you're lounging on a beach somewhere or lounging on your couch. And that's what I'm talking about. That's the thing most people are trying to run away from, which is insane when you actually think about it. Without work, without something to struggle towards, to work towards, to aim for, life loses its texture. You've probably noticed how people who retire early and just stop doing anything productive tend to deteriorate pretty quickly. They lose their sharpness, their sense of purpose, their reasons to get up in the morning. And the work itself, the act of pursuing something difficult, that's where, in my opinion, meaning lives. Being valuable to other people, or having skills that matter, or being the person who can solve problems. This is the stuff that feeds your soul in ways that passive entertainment never will. And when you look at something and say, I built that, or I fixed that, or I made that happen, there's a satisfaction there that is pretty deep, and it's primal almost. Humans are built to create, to overcome obstacles, to prove to themselves that they can handle whatever life throws at them. Your work shapes who you become. And I don't mean just your job title. I'm talking about the challenges you take on, the skills you develop, the discipline you build through showing up every day, even when you don't feel like it. All of that creates your identity as well. You become the kind of person who can handle pressure, who can deliver results, who doesn't fold when things get hard. And that's invaluable. And that creates confidence and this belief in yourself that nobody else can take away from you. And people respect also capability. They respect someone who can actually get things done, who brings value to the table, who doesn't make excuses. And more importantly, you respect yourself. You know you're not coasting or taking the easy path or wasting your potential. You know you're actually aiming for something and going after it full force. And the process of pursuing goals, of working towards something that actually matters to you, gives purpose and structure to your days as well. Without it, you're just drifting and reacting to whatever comes your way, and you just fill up time until you're no longer really here. And the people who complain most about being busy are often the same ones who feel lost and empty when they have nothing to do. And you need the process, you need the work, even if you don't realize it. Having something to aim for, even if you've never fully reached it or never will, it gives your life a direction. It turns randomness into purpose. You're not just doing things anymore. You're building towards something. You're moving in a specific direction. You're making progress. And that progress, even when it's slow and almost invisible, and frustrating, it still feels better than aimlessness. And when you have clear goals and you're engaged in the process of actually achieving them, decisions become easier. The process gives you basically a framework for making better decisions across your entire life. And your brain needs something to focus on, something that demands your attention and energy. And when you're engaged in meaningful work in the process of building or creating or improving something, you're not sitting around overthinking your problems or spiraling into anxiety. You're just too busy to actually care. You're just doing something productive. The work becomes a kind of a meditation in a way, a therapy almost, a way to channel your mental energy into something constructive instead of destructive. And I think a lot of people have developed these destructive habits in their lives that they have. We all have some of them. And I think the reason they show up is because we don't have enough meaningful work, because we don't throw ourselves, or we stop ourselves from actually throwing ourselves into something deep and being obsessed and actually working on it and reading and researching and creating and being, obsessed with it, basically. You don't develop any new capabilities by staying comfortable, by doing what's easy, by avoiding challenges. You grow when you actually push yourself, when you take on things that scare you a little bit, when you work at the edge of your current abilities. That's how you actually expand. And that's how you expand what's actually possible for you. Every challenge you tackle builds skills that compound over time. And these skills transfer across domains. Once you've pushed through a really hard project or a goal, other challenges don't seem as hard anymore. And you take with you some skills that will make every future challenge and every future project just a little bit easier, even if they're bigger. And you know you can figure it out since you've done it before. So grinding is valuable. And I know that that word has become a bit of a cliche at this point, but I don't necessarily have a better word for it. I'm talking about that period where you're putting in serious effort, where you're working harder than what feels comfortable, when you're sacrificing some short-term pleasure for long-term gain. And the thing people miss is that phase, as hard as it is, as frustrating as it is sometimes, is actually one of the most fulfilling phases you'll ever experience. And looking back on the times that in my life that I felt the happiest is when I was grinding towards something the hardest, when I was working the most towards something, when I was interested in something and actually obsessed in it, when I was pushing myself to my limits. Those were some of my best memories. There's something about operating at a high capacity that makes you feel intensely alive. Your senses sharpen, your mind clears, you're fully engaged with what you're actually doing. And you're not checking out, you're not just going through the motions, you're not sleepwalking through your days. You're present, you're focused, you're pouring yourself into something that actually matters to you. And even though it's exhausting, even though you might be stressed or overwhelmed at times, underneath all that is this vitality that you just don't get from almost anything else. And I think people get into these addictions because they are lacking this, because they're lacking this meaning, because they're lacking this obsession with something. Your mind has to have some kind of a goal. And when it's not directed towards something constructive, well, it will find something destructive to latch onto. And the highs feel higher when you're actually working hard. Those highs are also higher than anything else you will experience, the highs of achievement. And not only that, but a good meal hits different when you've actually earned it through a long day of productive work. Sleep feels incredible when you've actually pushed yourself physically and mentally. And the ones of you who actually go to the gym and lift weights, you probably know what I'm talking about here. The ones who probably run as well, or do any amount of exercise or any strenuous exercise, all of you know that sleep and rest feels way better when you've actually done something physical, when you've pushed yourself, and now it feels deserved. And it feels better on top of it. So victories, even small ones, feel sweeter when you know how much effort you've put into achieving them. And the work creates basically a contrast in your life that makes everything more vivid and more satisfying. And you can't feel proud of yourself when you haven't done anything worth being proud of. That's the reality of it at the end of the day. But when you've put in a hard day's work, when you've pushed through resistance and self-doubt and fatigue to accomplish something meaningful, even if you haven't really accomplished anything that day, but you have put in the work, you have struggled, you have met resistance and gone over it, you have met doubt and gone over it, and you've met fatigue and you've gone over it. Even if you didn't accomplish anything that day, just the process of you doing that is the reward itself. You get to go to bed knowing you didn't waste the day. And that's the best reward. You didn't coast, you showed up fully, you showed up to the best of your abilities. And that feeling of earned pride is the most addictive feeling ever. And it's the most rewarding feeling ever. So being busy also gets a bad rap these days. Everyone talks about work-life balance and not overcommitting and protecting your time. And sure, there's some wisdom in that, but there's also something deeply satisfying about actually having a full schedule, about being in demand, about having multiple projects and responsibilities that matter. When you're busy in a meaningful way, when you're not just filling time, but actually working on things that move the needle, that's when you produce your best work. That's when you're operating at your peak. Busy creates momentum. When you're already in motion, when you're juggling multiple things and staying active and you're interested, it's easier to keep going, to take on one more project, to push a little harder. Momentum is real. Newton was right about that. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. When you're busy and productive, you have energy, you're sharp, you're in the flow. It's the periods of low activity, of too much downtime, where you actually start to lose your edge. And this can seem counterintuitive, but in my experience, activity actually creates energy rather than depletes it. Obviously, you need rest and recovery, but when you're engaged in meaningful work, when you're making progress on things that actually matter to you, you actually feel more energized than when you're sitting around doing nothing. And you've probably experienced this. For me specifically, maybe it's something I need to work on, but anytime I go on vacation, after a few days, I start to feel purposeless. I need something to put my mind to. And boredom is exhausting. And I'm not talking about that creative kind of boredom where you sit and think and write and you sit with your thoughts and sit in silence and figure out ways to move yourself forward and to move your life forward. I'm talking about the actual boredom of not having anything to put your mind to, of purposelessness. Purposelessness is draining. Work, real work that actually challenges you, gives you energy back. And when you're busy and productive, when you're actually building things and developing skills and creating value, you're also creating options for yourself. Opportunities tend to flow to people who are already doing things, already producing results, already demonstrating capability. The more you have going on, the more new possibilities open up. It compounds. Success breeds success. Activity breeds opportunity. And this is one of the reasons why people say that rich people keep getting richer. So the struggle isn't something to avoid or minimize or work around. The struggle is the point. That's where the good stuff happens. That's where you find out what you're made of, where you develop resilience and grit and confidence that you can actually handle hard things, when you embrace the struggle instead of resisting it, when you lean into the difficulty instead of running away from it. Everything changes and you'll start loving it. It's just like the gym. Again, if you've gone to the gym, if you've lifted any amount of weights, you know that the resistance is what you're looking for. Is the difficulty that you're looking for. Is the difficulty that shows you that you're going to grow from it afterwards. If it wasn't difficult, then you most likely won't grow. Every struggle is a test, and every test is an opportunity to prove something to yourself. Can you push through it when it's hard? Can you actually keep going when you don't feel like it? Can you maintain your standards even when you're tired or frustrated or discouraged? These are the questions that actually matter. These are the tests that build character, and you can't pass them without actual struggle, without real challenges that push you to your limits. Each time you push through a difficult period, each time you overcome an obstacle or solve a hard problem, you're building evidence for yourself. You're proving that you can actually handle it. And struggle reveals your standards as well. Because when things get hard, when you're tired or stressed or under pressure, that's when you find out what you're really committed to. And you don't transform by staying comfortable. You don't become a different, better version of yourself by avoiding challenges. Transformation requires struggle. The caterpillar has to struggle to break out of the cocoon. It's that struggle that gives the butterfly the strength to actually fly. And so having goals, real goals that stretch you and demand your best effort gives meaning to the work. The goals themselves almost don't matter as much as the fact that you have them, really, that you're actively pursuing something that matters to you. They give you a reason to push yourself, to develop discipline, to make sacrifices. They make the struggle worthwhile. Goals provide direction in a world that's constantly trying to pull your attention into a million different directions. When you have clear goals, you essentially have a filter for life. Without goals, you're just reacting, just responding to whatever's in front of you without any coherent strategy. But goals give you a way to measure progress. to know whether you're actually moving forward or just spinning your wheels. And you need that feedback at the end of the day. You need to be able to look back over a week or a month or a year or a lifetime for that matter and see concrete evidence that you've made progress, that the work you're putting in is producing results in real life. Goals make that measurement possible. And on hard days, when you don't feel like showing up, when you're tired or discouraged or doubting yourself, your goals are what pull you forward. They remind you of why you're actually doing this, what you're working towards, and about what's possible if you keep pushing. The goal becomes bigger than your current feelings. And when you're pursuing goals that you chose for yourself, when you're actually working towards something because you decided it matters to you, there's also a sense of autonomy and ownership. You're not following someone else's script, hopefully. You're not trying to meet someone else's expectations, again, hopefully. You're charting your own course, defining success on your own terms. And that freedom, that self-direction is profoundly satisfying. You own the outcome when you own the goal. And this is why I always say that it's important that the goal you set is actually yours. It's not goals that you've set because someone else wants something from you or because you're trying to meet someone else's expectations. Those goals have to be yours. If they're not yours, you won't find the motivation to pursue them. A lot of the times when we lack motivation to actually pursue a goal, it's because the goal isn't actually ours. It's someone else's goal that we're trying to achieve. But when you own the goal, you own the outcome, right? And the wins are yours. The setbacks are yours to learn from. The lessons are only yours. You're not a victim of circumstances or waiting for someone to give you permission or make things happen for you. You're the one making it happen. You're the one who decided this matters and committed to pursuing it. And making something happen, good or bad, is always better than being passive and having it happen to you, right? So the goals you choose reflect and shape your identity as well. They say something about who you are and who you want to become. When you set ambitious goals and pursue them seriously, you're making a statement about what you value. You're really making a statement about your values in general and what you believe you're capable of and what kind of life you want to build. Your goals are in a way a declaration of who you are, of your identity. And the pursuit of them is how you become the person capable of achieving them. And when you put it all together, when you really sit with this idea, you start to see that the ability to work hard, to be busy with meaningful things, to struggle towards goals that you actually care about, all of that is genuinely one of life's greatest blessings. It's easy to lose sight of this, especially when you're in the middle of a tough period. But if you zoom out, if you look at the alternative, you'll see that look around. Look at people who have nothing to work towards, no purpose, no meaningful challenges. That's a kind of death. That's not a life. That's what you should actually be afraid of. Not everyone gets to work. Not everyone has the health, the opportunity, the resources to pursue ambitious goals and actually push themselves to their limits. When you recognize that your ability to grind and push and work is actually a privilege, it reframes the whole experience. The hard work stops feeling like a burden and actually starts feeling like an opportunity you'd be foolish to waste. And you have this window, this period of your life where you can actually push hard and build and create, use it. Believe me, you won't have that forever. Your capacity to work at a high level isn't unlimited. Age will slow you down eventually. Circumstances might change. Your energy levels may decline over time. You don't have forever to make the most of your peak years, of your peak capacity. When you're young and healthy and capable, when you have the energy and the drive and the opportunity, that's when you need to push. That's when you need to make the most of what you have. And believe me, most of you have way more energy than you actually think. And the work you do, the things you build, the impact you make, that's what lasts beyond you. That's what gives your life significance beyond just your own experience. When you're working hard on something that matters, something that might outlive you or help other people or contribute to something bigger than yourself, you're building a legacy. You're making your time here actually count for something. And you're making a statement, I was here. And at the end of the day, fulfillment doesn't come from comfort or ease or avoiding challenges. You can try it. Try doing nothing for a month, if possible, and see how fast you'll feel unhappy. It comes from knowing you showed up fully, that you pushed yourself, that you didn't waste your potential. It comes from the satisfaction of hard work well done, from seeing the results of your efforts, from becoming the kind of person who can actually handle whatever life throws at them. And that's what this is really about. That's the blessing hidden inside the struggle. So with that said, let's talk about the infinite expansion. So this is something that took me way too long to actually figure out. You have way more capacity than you really think you do, like way more. And this is what I was talking about too earlier. Most of you have a lot more energy than you think. Most people operate at maybe 40% of what they're actually capable of. And they've convinced themselves that that's their limit. They hit a certain level of output or effort and they tell themselves, okay, this is as much as I can actually handle. And then they just camp out there. But that's complete nonsense. Your capacity isn't fixed. It expands based on what you demand from it, right? So your body and mind adapt to whatever load you put on them. That's just how human beings work. You start lifting weights and your muscles get stronger. You start running and your cardiovascular system improves. You start working longer hours or taking on more projects and your ability to handle complexity and workload increases. It's the same mechanism. The more you do, the more you become capable of doing, which means if you're not consistently pushing yourself to do more, you're actually limiting your future capacity. When you stay at a comfortable level of effort, when you only do what feels manageable and easy, you're teaching your system that this is all it needs to be able to handle. Your body doesn't waste resources maintaining capabilities you don't use. So if you're not regularly stretching yourself, if you're not pushing into that zone where things feel hard and maybe even a bit overwhelming, you're essentially telling your system to downgrade. And you're getting weaker even if you don't realize it. And here's the wild part. Anytime you get to a new level, anytime you push yourself and reach a new tier of output or income or responsibility, you normalize that level within just a couple of months. What felt intense and challenging at first becomes your new baseline. It becomes your new normal. You adjust. What once seemed impossible becomes routine. And this is actually incredible when you really think about it, since it means you can continuously expand what's actually normal for you. And most people hit that normalization point and they just stop. They get comfortable at the new level and they think, okay, I made it, I can relax now. They worked hard to get there and now they just want to coast. And look, I get the impulse, but this is where most people plateau. This is where growth stops. They've adapted to the new level, which means they're ready for the next challenge. But instead of taking it on, they just maintain, they settle, they plateau there. Now, settling leads to stagnation. And stagnation is dangerous. When you're not growing, when you're not pushing forward, you start to atrophy. Your skills get rusty. Your motivation starts to fade. Life starts to feel repetitive and boring. You lose that edge, that hunger, that sense of possibility that made the climb exciting in the first place. And then one day you wake up and you realize you've been coasting for years and you've forgotten what it really feels like to really go for something. The other thing about settling is that it closes you off to opportunities. When you're actively pushing, when you're taking on new challenges and expanding your capabilities, you're in the game, you're visible. You're meeting people and learning things and positioning yourself for the next opportunity. When you settle, when you stop pushing, you become invisible. Opportunities flow to people who are moving, who are growing, who are demonstrating that they can handle more. So you should always be looking for more challenges, more responsibility, more problems to solve, more opportunities to grow. And I don't mean more in a greedy or desperate way. I'm talking about more as a practice, as a commitment to continuous expansion. The goal isn't to accumulate more stuff or status. That's not what I'm talking about. The goal is to keep expanding who you are, what you're capable of, and what you can contribute. The value is in the process of pursuing more, in the act of stretching yourself and taking on bigger challenges. And when you commit to always doing more, to never settle at your current level, you force yourself to keep growing. You don't get to rest on your past achievements and you don't get to coast on what you built last year. You have to keep pushing, keep learning, keep developing new capabilities. And having something to aim for, some bigger goal or challenge on the horizon, gives you direction and energy, like we talked about. When you've accomplished your current goals and you don't immediately set new ones, you lose that forward momentum. You start drifting. But when you're always looking for the next mountain to climb, the next level to reach, you maintain that sense of purpose and drive that makes life feel vital and meaningful. The key thing is that you're the one deciding to go for more. You're not being pushed by external pressure or trying to meet someone else's expectations like we talked about earlier. You're choosing this for yourself as an expression of who you want to be. And that autonomy matters. When the drive for more comes from within, from your own desire to see what you're capable of, it's sustainable. It doesn't burn you out the way external pressure does. And every time you push into new territory, every time you take on something bigger than you've done before, you're really exploring new parts of yourself. You're discovering capabilities you didn't know you had. You're learning things about what you enjoy and what you're good at that you couldn't have learned by staying at your current level. The only way to find out what you're truly capable of is to keep pushing the boundaries. There are always new horizons, always. You never reach a point where there's nothing left to explore or achieve or learn. In fact, we just don't have enough time, actually, if you really think about it. The people who think they've done it all, who think they've reached the top, they're just not looking hard enough. There are always new fields to explore, new skills to develop, new ways to contribute. The world is vast and complex, and there's more than enough challenge and opportunity to last multiple lifetimes. The problem is we only get one. So the pursuit of mastery in any domain is essentially endless. You can always get better, always refine your skills, always deepen your understanding. The best practitioners in any field will tell you they're still learning, they're still discovering new layers and nuances. And when you commit to continuous expansion, to always pushing for more, you're really committing to ongoing mastery. You're saying you're never done growing. And that's beautiful, in my opinion. So the more work you take on, the more work you become able to handle. And this isn't just metaphorical, it's literally true. Your capacity for work expands with use. When you're regularly operating at high capacity, when you're juggling multiple projects and responsibilities, you develop systems and skills that make you more efficient. You get better at prioritizing, at managing your time, at making quick decisions. You level up your operating system. So you're forced to develop better systems when you're handling a lot. You can't just wing it anymore when you've got 10 things going on. You need structures, you need routines, you need processes that allow you to manage complexity without dropping balls. And once you develop those systems, you can handle even more. Your capacity keeps expanding as you get more sophisticated in how you operate. And you become more efficient almost by necessity. When you've got limited time and high demands, you figure out how to cut out unnecessary stuff and you learn to focus on what actually matters. You develop basically an intuition for where to put your energy and what you can safely ignore or delegate. And this efficiency compounds over time, which means you can actually do more in less time as you gain experience. And your decision-making speed increases dramatically when you're operating at high capacity. You don't have time to really agonize over every choice. You learn to make decisions quickly with incomplete information, and you get comfortable with that. You get comfortable with imperfection. Most decisions are reversible anyway, and this ability to decide quickly and move forward is valuable across every area of life. So there's a confidence that comes from knowing you can handle a heavy load. When you've successfully juggled multiple big projects, when you've delivered results while operating at or near your limit, you stop doubting whether you can actually do it. You have proof, you've done it before. That confidence allows you to take on even bigger challenges since you're not held back by fear or self-doubt anymore. You know you'll figure it out. And your stress tolerance increases as well. What would have completely overwhelmed you a year ago now feels manageable. And you've adapted. You've learned how to function under pressure, how to stay focused when things are chaotic, how to keep moving forward even when you're uncertain. Stress becomes less of a threat and more of just a normal part of doing big things. And you discover you have reserves that you didn't know existed. When you really need to, when something important is on the line, you can dig deeper and find another gear. And most people never find out what they're capable of in a crunch since they never put themselves in situations that actually demand it. But when you're regularly pushing your limits, you get familiar with those reserves and you learn how to access them when you need them. And look, nobody tells you that you should exercise less or that you're working out too much unless you're literally injuring yourself. So why do people feel entitled to tell you you're working too much or doing too much with your business or your goals? It's the same principle if you think about it. You're training, you're building capacity, you're developing strength and endurance in a different domain. And just like with physical exercise, the right amount is whatever you decide it is based on your goals and what you're trying to achieve. So only you know how much you should be doing. Only you know what your goals are, what you're willing to sacrifice, what matters to you. Other people will project their own limits and priorities onto you, and they'll tell you to slow down, to relax, to stop pushing so hard. But they don't know what you're after. They don't know what drives you. They're measuring your choices against their own standards, which are probably completely different from yours. And the people who really matter, the people who actually support you and understand you, they won't really try to limit you. They'll see that you're pursuing something important to you and they'll either support it or they're going to stay out of the way. They might worry about you occasionally, which is completely fair, but they won't try to impose their version of balance or success on you. And they respect your autonomy to choose your own path. The people who care too much about how hard you're working, who constantly tell you to do less, who make you feel guilty for your ambition, they usually fall into one of two categories. Either they're projecting their own insecurities and limitations on you, or they genuinely don't understand what you're actually trying to build. In either case, their opinions on how you should operate don't carry much weight. You can appreciate their concern, but you don't have to let it change your trajectory. And the only thing you should do in that case is literally smile and keep doing whatever you wanted to do. So you don't need anyone's permission to push yourself as hard as you want to push yourself. This is your life. These are your goals. You get to decide what you're willing to do to achieve them. Too many people dim their ambition and dial back their effort to make other people feel comfortable. They're afraid of being seen as too intense or too obsessed, but the truth is anything worth achieving actually requires some intensity and obsession, at least for a period of time. So stop apologizing for your work ethic. Stop feeling guilty about wanting more and doing more. And stop explaining yourself to people who don't get it. You're building something. You're pursuing mastery. You're seeing what you're capable of. And that's admirable, at least in my opinion. That's something to be proud of. The fact that other people wouldn't make the same choice doesn't make your choice wrong. So you decided to go for it. You decided that this matters for you. You decided that you're willing to put in the work and make the sacrifices. And that decision, in my opinion, is valid and you should own it fully. Don't let other people's discomfort or confusion or jealousy even make you second guess that what you know is really right for you. This is your path and you're walking it intentionally. So life expands with challenges to conquer. When you've mastered your current level, when you've achieved your current goals, the healthy response is to look for new things to conquer, new skills to develop, new problems to solve, new territories to explore. This keeps you sharp. This keeps life interesting. This is what ongoing growth looks like in practice. And if you're bored, it means you've stopped challenging yourself. It means you've been coasting too long at your current level. Boredom is really a signal that you need a new challenge, something that demands your full attention and pushes you out of your comfort zone, something that interests you. And the solution to boredom isn't entertainment or distraction like most people do. The solution is a bigger challenge that forces you to grow, to conquer, to do new things. And when you're actively working on something that challenges you, you don't have time or mental space for boredom. You're fully engaged. Your mind is active. You're solving problems and learning and making progress. That engagement is what makes life feel rich and textured. Entertainment can be fun, but it doesn't provide that same deep satisfaction that comes from being truly engaged in meaningful work. And there's a vitality that comes from constantly pushing yourself and taking on new challenges. You feel more alive, more present, more connected to what you're doing. Compare that to the feeling of coasting or just maintaining, of doing the same thing you did last year. One path leads to growth and energy, and the other leads to stagnation and a feeling of slow decay. Like we said earlier, it's kind of a death in a way. So you should be expanding into new areas continuously. Maybe that means taking on a bigger role at work. Maybe it means starting a side project. Maybe it means learning a new skill that opens up new possibilities. The specific direction matters less than the fact that you're actually expanding at all, that you're not content to just maintain your current position indefinitely. Your comfort zone should be expanding along with your capabilities. And what felt scary or impossible a year ago should feel pretty routine now. And there should be new things that scare you a little, new challenges on the horizon that make you wonder if you can actually pull them off. That healthy tension between what you can comfortably do and what you're reaching for is where growth happens. And there's always a next level. There's always something bigger you could take on. There's some new way you could challenge yourself, some new domain you could explore. Always. The game doesn't end when you hit your current goal. That's just the completion of one chapter, of one thing, of one challenge. The game keeps going as long as you want it to, as long as you keep setting new goals and taking on new challenges, and as long as you're alive, honestly. And that's the way it should be, in my opinion, once again. So with that said, let's talk about the wealth paradox. So most people who don't have a lot of money are actually completely obsessed with money, and they think about it constantly, and they stress about bills, they calculate every purchase, they fixate on their bank account balance. And I'm not judging that at all. I've been there myself. And when you don't have money, when you're struggling to cover basic expenses, it's pretty hard to think about anything else. I admit that. The paradox is that this obsession, this focus on money as the primary outcome actually keeps you stuck. And the people who make real money, who build actual wealth, they're focused on something else entirely. You have to detach from money as the outcome you're chasing. And this sounds completely backwards when you need money, I know. How are you basically supposed to make money if you're not focused on making money? I get that. But here's what actually happens when money is your primary goal. You make decisions based on short term financial gain rather than long term value creation. And you take opportunities that pay well but don't necessarily build skills or relationships or any reputation. And you optimize for the immediate cash rather than for the things that compound over time. And when you shift your focus from making money to creating value, to solving problems for people, to building skills that matter, the money usually follows. It just does. I didn't believe this for the longest time. I thought it was one of those feel good platitudes that some rich people say to make themselves sound wise. But then I actually tested it. I stopped making decisions based primarily on what would pay the most and started making decisions based on what would teach me the most or what would create the most value. And my income went up, significantly up. And the skills you develop while focused on value creation are also worth way more than any immediate paycheck. And when you're obsessed with money, you might take a job that pays well but doesn't really teach you anything. You're trading time for dollars. And when you focus on building valuable skills, on becoming the kind of person who can solve important problems, you're building assets that appreciate over time. Your earning potential increases exponentially rather than linearly. And this isn't to say that you shouldn't be working a job. This is to say that you should be focusing at whatever you're working on creating the most value in that specific place, and building more skills and learning as much as possible. Now, once you make and save some real money, once you've got a few thousand in the bank and you're not really stressed about covering expenses anymore, your whole relationship with money kind of shifts. You start to see it as a score in an infinite game rather than as survival. And it becomes feedback about the value you're creating rather than the primary goal itself. Some people find this realization a bit depressing. They thought money would solve everything, and now they see it's just a number that tracks one dimension of their life. Other people, me included, find it pretty liberating because an infinite game is one you play to keep playing, to keep growing, to keep expanding your capabilities. The goal isn't to win and then stop. The goal is to continue playing at a higher and higher level. And when you see money as a score in that infinite game, it gives you useful feedback about how you're doing without becoming the entire point. You can use it to track whether you're creating more value this year than last year, whether you're growing, whether your skills are becoming more valuable in the marketplace, and all of these things. And whether this perspective gives you more motivation or less really depends entirely on how you frame it. If you were chasing money thinking it would make you happy and give your life meaning, then realizing it's just a score might kind of deflate you. If you see it as a liberation from the tyranny of never having enough, as freedom to focus on what actually matters while still tracking your progress, then it energizes you. And the facts are the same either way. The meaning you make of those facts is up to you. So if money is your outcome, if that's what you're optimizing for above all else, you're really optimizing for the wrong thing. And this is coming from personal experience. Again, this might be the hardest truth on this list to accept, especially if you're broke right now. But stay with me. Money is a tool, right? It's a means to an end. When you make it the end itself, you corrupt your decision making in ways that ultimately limit how much you can actually make. You can make money in a lot of different ways, and some of those ways are good, some of those are actually bad. The good ones involve creating value, solving problems, building things that improve people's lives. Other ways can be bad. They involve manipulation, exploitation, cutting corners, doing harm, etc. When money is your primary goal, when you're not guided by any deeper principle or purpose, you're vulnerable to taking the bad paths, and you'll justify almost anything if it pays well enough. And your integrity gets eroded when money is the ultimate metric. You start making compromises. You do work you're not really proud of. You partner with people you don't necessarily respect. You promote products you don't believe in. Each compromise seems small and justifiable in the moment. You need the money, right? So might as well do it. But those compromises accumulate and they shape who you become. Eventually, you look in the mirror and you don't really recognize the person looking back. And short term thinking dominates when money is the goal. You take the quick cash over the opportunity that would build something lasting. You prioritize immediate income over long term reputation or relationships. And this caps your potential. The really big wins, the life changing opportunities, they come from playing the long game. They come from building trust and reputation over years, from developing deep expertise, from creating real value consistently. And sometimes they come from working at a job for a long period of time and learning something in the meantime, learning how to become better at whatever it is that you want to do after that job, and using that time to learn as much as possible while having a stable income, basically. Now, everyone has a number, even if they don't consciously know what it really is. It's the amount of money where they feel like they've made it, where they can actually relax. And for some people, it's $50,000 a year. For others, it's 10 million in the bank. The specific number doesn't matter as much as the fact that it actually exists. And here's the problem. If money is your outcome, if that's what you're chasing, then when you hit your number, something dangerous usually happens. Your motivation completely evaporates because you've set a goal for this number. And once you achieve it, that goal is done. Unless you keep setting new goals and just up the number with no meaning behind it, then it becomes a pretty empty game. And the drive that got you to your number disappears once you reach it. You've accomplished what you've set out to accomplish. You've won the game as you defined it, so why keep playing, right? And this is why you see people who work incredibly hard to reach a certain income level and then completely plateau. They're not lazy. They don't suddenly lose their work ethic. They got to that number in the first place, so they must be hard workers. They just reach the finish line they set for themselves, and they don't have a compelling reason to keep going because money was the only goal, essentially. And the only way that some of these people actually overcome that is to set a new number as a goal and then reach that, and then the next one and the next one. But that's a pretty empty game because at some point you'll realize that you're just chasing numbers with no meaning behind them. Now, when money is your metric for success, hitting your number creates a purpose vacuum, right? You built your identity around pursuing this goal. You sacrificed for it. You organized your life around reaching it. And now you're there. What now? If you don't have something deeper driving you, some purpose beyond the money itself, then you end up feeling empty even after you've achieved what you thought you wanted, even after you achieve the next number. So this will keep repeating itself. And here's something wild that I wish I understood earlier. You will normalize whatever income level you reach. After a few months of making a certain amount, it stops feeling like a lot. It becomes your new baseline. This happens whether you go up or down. You adjust. This normalization isn't neutral though. It has real consequences for what you allow yourself to earn going forward. So if you've normalized a specific income, you will tend to stick to that income whether you consciously want to or not. Your subconscious has decided this is your level now. And this is what people like you make. And when opportunities come up that would push you above your normalized level, you'll find reasons to decline them or sabotage them. You'll feel uncomfortable with the idea of making significantly more. It feels wrong somehow, like you're basically overreaching or being greedy. You'll create all these mental weird games with yourself just to sabotage yourself. And you create an invisible ceiling for yourself based on what you've actually normalized. You might consciously want to double your income. You might set goals around making more money. But if you haven't shifted what feels normal to you, if you're still identified with your current income level, you'll unconsciously keep yourself from breaking through. You'll work hard enough to maintain your current level, but you won't do what it takes to actually jump to the next tier, to the next level. And your income becomes tied to your identity. You're a person who makes this much. That's who you are. To make significantly more would require becoming a different kind of person, which feels threatening to your sense of self. So you stay where you are, where it's comfortable and familiar, even if you're not really happy there. So breaking through requires shifting your identity before you actually shift your income. And denormalization works in reverse as well. Once you've made a certain amount, it's really hard to accept making less. You've normalized that income level as your baseline. Going below it feels like failure, like you're moving backwards. And this can be positive or negative depending on your situation. It can drive you to maintain high standards and not settle for opportunities beneath you, or it can make you rigid and unable to adapt when circumstances change. And people resist downgrading their lifestyle or income even when it would be strategically smart to do so. Maybe there's an opportunity that would require taking a pay cut in the short term, but would lead to much bigger things down the road. Most people can't really do it. They've normalized their current spending and income, and they can't imagine going backwards even temporarily. They stay stuck in the comfortable known rather than taking a calculated risk on something better. and you can get trapped by your normalized income. You've built a lifestyle around it. You've got commitments and expenses that assume that level of income. Changing direction, taking a risk, pursuing something you're actually passionate about, all of that becomes harder when you're locked into maintaining a certain income level. And the money that was supposed to give you freedom ends up constraining you, right? So you have to shift your focus away from money as the primary outcome. This doesn't mean you ignore money or pretend that it doesn't really matter. You still track it, you still care about it, you still make strategic decisions about how to increase it, but it's no longer the thing you're optimizing for. It becomes a secondary metric, a measure of whether you're creating value rather than the goal itself. What should you optimize for instead? Well, that's going to be different for everyone. Maybe it's impact, maybe it's the number of people you help or the magnitude of the problems you solve. Maybe it's mastery, becoming truly excellent at your craft. Maybe it's freedom, building a life where you have autonomy over your time and choices. Maybe it's legacy, creating something that outlasts you. The specific thing matters less than the fact that it's something deeper and more meaningful than just accumulating money. And when you're optimizing for something other than money, your decisions change in subtle but important ways. You might take a project that pays less but lets you work with brilliant people you can actually learn from. You might invest time in building something that won't pay off immediately but aligns with your long-term vision. You might turn down opportunities that would be lucrative but would compromise your values or pull away from what matters. And paradoxically, when you stop chasing money directly and start chasing excellence or impact or mastery, you often make more money. That's the thing. You become more valuable. You build a reputation for doing great work rather than just being a mercenary. And people will want to work with you, want to pay you well, since they know you're driven by something deeper than just extracting maximum cash, right? And the money flows to you more easily when you're not desperately grasping for it. So you still use money as a measurement tool. It's useful feedback at the end of the day. If your income is growing, that's usually a signal that you're creating more value, that your skills are developing, that you're moving in a good direction, especially if you're not doing something sketchy. But if your income is stagnant or declining, that's feedback too. Maybe you need to develop new skills. Maybe the market is shifting. Maybe you're not creating as much value as you think. The feedback is valuable even when money isn't necessarily the goal. So think of your money like a health metric. Your weight or your blood pressure or your resting heart rate, they're useful numbers to track. They give you feedback about your health, but you don't optimize directly for having a specific number on the scale, right? You optimize for being healthy, for eating well and exercising and managing your stress. The numbers reflect those underlying behaviors. Money works the same way. Track it, use it as feedback, but optimize for the underlying activities that create value. And when money stops being the goal and becomes just a metric, you gain a kind of freedom. You're not anxiously checking your bank balance constantly. You're not stressed about every financial decision. You know that if you keep focusing on creating value, on developing skills, on doing excellent work, the money will take care of itself. That trust, that freedom from constant financial anxiety, it's incredibly valuable even beyond the financial benefits. So here's what happened to me personally. The first time I really invested in myself, and I mean really invested serious money in education or coaching or tools, I made more money that same month. I didn't expect that. I thought I was making a sacrifice, in fact, spending money now to get benefits later. But the return was almost immediate. And it wasn't a coincidence. It happened again the next time I invested and the time after that. And it's like a law of the universe or something. When you invest in yourself, you're making a statement of belief. You believe you're worth investing in. You believe you can generate a return on that investment. You believe in your ability to grow and improve and create more value. And that belief shifts something fundamental in how you show up on a day-to-day basis, even when you don't actually really notice it. You carry yourself differently, you take action more boldly, and you expect better outcomes. All of that translates into better results. So putting money on the line creates real commitment. It's easy to say you want to learn something or improve at something when it's free. But when you've paid for it, when you've made a financial commitment, you show up differently. You do the work, you implement what you learn, you take it seriously. And that commitment is what generates the actual results, which is why free information rarely produces the same outcomes as paid education, even when the content is similar. Investing in yourself raises your standards for yourself. you've made a significant investment. You can't just coast anymore and let it go to waste, right? You have to rise to meet that investment, to prove to yourself that it was worth it. And that raised standard affects everything you do. You work harder, you show up more consistently, you hold yourself to a higher bar, and those changes compound quickly, even if you actually don't notice that it's happening underneath the surface. So the return of self-investment is like any other investment. When you invest in stocks or real estate, you might get a 10% or a 20% return annually if you're lucky. When you invest in yourself, in your skills and knowledge and capabilities, you can see 10x or 100x returns. A single insight from a course or a book or a coach can actually change the trajectory of your entire career and life. And a new skill can open up opportunities that weren't even visible before. The ROI potential is essentially unlimited. So the benefits of self-investment compound over time. The skill you learn today doesn't just help you now. It helps you for the rest of your career. It helps you for the rest of your life, whatever that skill is. It builds on the skills you learned before, and they start to connect with each other. It opens doors to learning even more advanced skills. Every investment in yourself makes all future investments more valuable. You're building a foundation that supports exponential growth. And what you put out comes back to you in abundance. I know that sounds mystical or a bit woo, but I've seen it play out too many times to dismiss it. When you actually invest generously in yourself, when you bet on yourself, the universe seems to respond. That's just my experience. And again, all of these lessons are from my personal journal at the end of the day. Opportunities appear, money shows up from unexpected sources, things that seem difficult become easy, and maybe there's a spiritual component to it. Maybe it's just psychology. I don't know, but the pattern is consistent enough that I trust it now. So with that being said, let's continue and talk about the self-investment law. So for the longest time, I believe the path to wealth was really to save every dollar that came my way, every single one. I would agonize over small purchases, skip opportunities to learn or grow if they cost money, hoard cash like my life depended on it. And look, when you're not making a lot or when you don't have an idea for a business or what to do next, saving does make sense. It's definitely better than spending all of your money every week or every month. And you need some cushion, you need some security, but I took it way too far. I turned saving into an identity, into a virtue of sorts. And I was proud of how little I spent and how much I could squeeze out of every dollar. And that saving mentality comes from scarcity thinking. You believe there's only so much money available and you have to hold on to whatever you get as tightly as possible. And every dollar you spend is a dollar you'll never see again. So you better make damn sure it's basically worth it. And this mindset keeps you small. It keeps you operating at your current level since you're unwilling to invest in the things that would help you grow and get to the next level. So you're so busy protecting what you have that you can't build anything bigger. And everything feels like a risk when you're in that scarcity mode. Spending money on education feels risky. Hiring help feels risky. Investing in tools or systems feels risky. Buying some books even feels risky. So you just don't do it. You keep doing everything yourself with whatever free resources you can find, and you stay in your comfort zone since stepping out would require spending money you're not really willing to spend. And this risk aversion masquerading as financial responsibility is actually what keeps most people stuck. Staying in scarcity thinking keeps you broke. I know that it sounds harsh, especially since scarcity thinking often develops from actually being broke. But there's a point where you have to break the cycle. You have to be willing to invest in yourself, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when it means depleting your savings a bit. That willingness to invest is what creates the possibility of earning more. And hoarding money doesn't really make you any wealthier. It just makes you a broke person with some cash in the bank. Now, look, this is for the people that are actually saving, because there's also a ton of people that basically don't spend on themselves in the ways that would produce a return, but spend money on everything that would not produce any return whatsoever for various reasons. One of which is obviously always to be able to show off to other people in some way or another. So buying clothes when you don't need any, when you bought some last week, buying the newest iPhone that comes out just because you want to have the newest iPhone when you don't really need it. All of these things are unnecessary. And this is specifically for the people that are actually saving and know how to save some money, or that feel like it's risky to spend it on something on themselves, which will produce a return, but don't necessarily feel it's risky to buy a new iPhone, for example. So the shift happened for me when I finally made a significant investment in myself. I'm talking about spending an amount that actually felt scary, that made me question whether I was making a huge mistake. I bought a course, invested in some coaching, and put some real money on the line. And then something wild happened. I made more money a few months later, or that same month. Not a little bit more, but significantly more. Enough that the investment paid for itself multiple times over. And at first I thought it was just a coincidence. Maybe it was timing. Maybe I could or would have made that money anyway. But then I did it again and made another investment in myself. And again, my income jumped. And then I did it a third time and same result. At some point, you have to stop calling it a coincidence, basically, and start recognizing it's a pattern. There's something real happening here, right? Some kind of law or principle that governs how this works. And the thing is, even every time I've bought a book for one reason or another, I've made like 10 times more the amount that I paid for the book just a week later or so. So it honestly feels like a universal law at this point. The more you invest in yourself, the more you actually make. And it's almost mechanical in how consistently it plays out. I've tested it enough times now that I actually trust it completely. And when I want to increase my income, one of the first things I do is I actually look for an investment to make in myself, a course to take, a coach to hire, some kind of a tool to buy, something that will expand my capabilities or knowledge. The money always comes back multiplied. And I didn't have this principle for years. People would tell me to invest in myself and I would actually roll my eyes because it sounded like one of those things that, as I said earlier, I thought it's one of those things that rich people say to make themselves feel superior. Oh, I invest in myself and that's why I'm successful. Yeah, right. You're successful since you already had money or connections or opportunities. The self-investment thing is just a story you tell yourself. That's what I thought. Anyway, so I was completely wrong, like embarrassingly wrong. The principle is actually real. The people who were telling me to invest in myself weren't actually lying or trying to scam me. They were sharing something that actually works, something they tested and proven in their own lives. And my skepticism wasn't sophisticated critical thinking or something. It was just fear and scarcity dressed up as rationality. And I was scared to spend money, so I convinced myself the whole concept was BS. And I had all kinds of excuses for why I couldn't invest in myself. I didn't have enough money saved yet, or I needed to do some more research before making a decision. I could probably learn the same thing for free if I just looked hard enough, stuff like that. These excuses always felt reasonable at the time, but they were just defense mechanisms protecting me from the discomfort of making a real investment in myself, and they kept me stuck in the same place, earning the same amount with the same limitations. And under all the excuses was just fear of wasting money, fear of making a bad investment, fear of looking stupid if it didn't work out. And that fear is totally understandable. Money is precious after all, especially when you don't have much of it. I think most people don't actually realize how precious it is, really, but that same fear is what prevents you from breaking through to the next level. You can't grow significantly without taking some risks. You can't expand your capabilities without investing in yourself. And the only way to really know if this principle works is to actually test it yourself. And that's the thing. That's the quote unquote catch. You can't logic your way into believing it. You can't just think about it theoretically. You actually have to put some money on the line and make a real investment in your growth and see what happens. That first test is the hardest one since you don't have the experience yet. You don't have the proof that it basically works. You just have to take a leap. And the investment has to be significant enough that it matters to you. It has to be an amount that feels a bit scary, that makes you take it seriously. And if you spend $20 on a book, yeah, that's technically an investment in yourself. But if you've done it 100 times, then it's not really something that makes you feel a little scared. It doesn't have the same psychological weight as spending, for example, a few thousand on a course or a coach. The bigger investment changes how you show up. It creates real skin in the game. Now, again, if you don't usually buy books or something like that, or if you don't actually invest in yourself, even $20, then doing that and actually investing $20 in yourself should be the first step. I'm not saying you should go immediately and spend thousands on a coach or a course or whatever, on anything for that matter, if you have never actually built up to that level. So once you test it once and see results, you have proof. You know it works for you specifically and in your situation. And that proof makes the second investment easier and the third one easier. Each time you do it and see returns, your confidence in the principle will grow. And eventually you'll reach a point where investing in yourself feels less like a risk and more like a sure bet. And when you invest in yourself, you're essentially increasing your value in the marketplace. You're developing skills that make you more capable, more useful, more able to solve problems that matter. And that increased value translates directly into increased earning potential. Companies even pay more for employees with better skills. Companies pay more for people that actually have gone through some training. Clients pay more for service providers who can actually deliver better results. The market in general rewards value, and investing in yourself is how you build that value. Every skill you develop makes you more valuable. Learning to write well, to speak persuasively, to manage projects effectively, to understand data, to build systems, whatever skills are relevant to your field, each one increases what you can offer. And those skills compound over time as well. The writing skill helps with the speaking skill. The systems thinking helps with the project management. They layer on top of each other and create capabilities that are worth way more than the sum of the individual skills by themselves. So the more skills you stack, the more rare you become. And plenty of people can write. Plenty of people can understand marketing, but people who can write well and understand marketing and know how to build systems and have technical skills, that combination becomes increasingly rare with each skill you add. And rare equals valuable. The investment you make in developing each skill is buying you positioning in a less crowded space where you can command higher prices. And your current skills will become obsolete eventually. The world changes, technology advances. What was valuable 5 years ago might be commoditized now. And if you're not continuously investing in new skills and staying current or getting ahead of trends, you're slowly becoming less valuable. The investment in yourself isn't just about growth. It's also about maintaining relevance, about making sure you don't get left behind as things evolve. And so knowledge compounds in ways that money in a savings account never will. When you actually invest in learning something new, that knowledge stays with you. It influences how you think, how you approach problems, what opportunities you can recognize. You might learn something that doesn't seem immediately useful, but then 3 years later, it becomes the key insight that unlocks massive opportunity for you. You can't predict which pieces of knowledge will be valuable, which is why continuous investment in learning is so important. And new knowledge gives you new perspectives. It lets you see problems differently, connect ideas across domains, come up with solutions that people operating with less knowledge can't actually see. And that expanded perspective is valuable in itself. It makes you better at everything you do since you're working with a richer mental model of how things work. And each investment in learning expands your perspectives further, which compounds your ability to actually create value. And so there's a confidence that comes from knowledge. When you know your stuff, when you're invested in really understanding your field, you can speak with authority. You can make decisions without second guessing yourself constantly. You can see opportunities that others miss since you understand the landscape better. And that confidence affects how people perceive you, which opportunities you're offered, and how much you're actually paid. So investing in yourself often means investing in access to people as well. Courses and coaching and mastermind groups and conferences, they're not just about the content or the learning. They're about the network you actually build, the people you meet, the relationships you develop, the community you become part of. That network has value that far exceeds whatever you paid to access it. And the right relationships often open doors that you can't open on your own. Someone knows someone who's looking for exactly what you offer. Someone introduces you to an opportunity you never would have heard about otherwise. Or someone vouches for you, which gives you credibility you couldn't have built for yourself. These doors, these opportunities that come through relationships, they can be life-changing. They can shortcut years of grinding. And so you learn faster when you're learning from people who are ahead of you. You can avoid mistakes they already made. You can implement strategies they've already tested. You can get feedback that would take years to develop on your own. The investment in access to experienced people accelerates your growth dramatically, and you're essentially buying time, which is your most valuable resource. And being around people who are operating at a higher level also changes your perspective on what's possible. Because when you're surrounded by people making 10 times what you make, for example, doing things you've never done or operating at a scale you've never reached, it expands your sense of what's actually achievable. You start thinking bigger, your goals increase. What seemed impossible starts to seem merely just difficult. And when you invest in a community or a coaching relationship, for example, you get accountability as well. Someone is checking in on your progress. You've made commitments to other people. There's a social pressure to actually do the work and implement what you're learning. And that accountability is valuable since most people struggle with self-discipline in isolation. The investment creates external structure that keeps you moving forward even when your internal motivation flags. And so the emotional support you also get from a community of people on similar paths matters more than you'd expect, because building something, pushing yourself, trying to level up, it is hard. I mean, nobody is denying that. There are moments of doubt, moments where you want to quit, moments where you feel like you're not making progress. And having people around you who actually get it, who encourage you, who've been through similar struggles, that support can be the difference between pushing through and giving up, right? So being part of the right community also helps you calibrate your standards. You see what excellent work looks like. You see what's actually normal at higher levels. You realize that what you thought was good enough is actually just okay. That recalibration is what actually pushes you to raise your game, to hold yourself to higher standards. The investment in community is an investment in continuously improving your benchmark for what constitutes quality work. So investing in yourself also means investing in tools and systems that make you more effective, software that automates your tasks, or equipment that improves the quality, services that handle things that you shouldn't be doing yourself. These investments pay for themselves quickly since they either save you time or improve your output, or both. And time is your most valuable asset. Any investment that buys you back time is probably worth making. If you're spending hours every week on tasks that could be automated or outsourced for less money than your time is worth, then you're making a bad trade. The resistance to these investments usually comes from not valuing your own time highly enough. So the resistance to these investments usually comes from not valuing your own time highly enough. You'll spend 3 hours doing something yourself to save $50, which makes sense if your time is worth less than $17 an hour. But if you're trying to build something significant, your time needs to be worth way more than that, right? So tools and systems that free up mental energy that you can direct towards higher value activities. When you're not bogged down in administrative tasks, when you're not manually doing things that could be automated, you can actually focus on strategy, on creative work, on relationship building, on the activities that actually move the needle. And that focus is where leverage lives. That's where you create disproportionate value relative to the time invested. And also, better tools often mean better output. Professional equipment produces professional results. Good software makes work easier and faster. These improvements in quality affect how you're perceived and what you can actually charge. And the investment in tools is really an investment in your professional image and the quality of the work you can actually deliver. Both of those directly impact your earning potential. Now, tools and systems also give you leverage. They let you accomplish more with the same amount of effort. They multiply your output. And when you invest in leverage, when you build systems that work for you, even when you're not actively working, you break the direct time for money trade. You create the possibility of earning more without just working more hours. That leverage is how you scale beyond the limitations of your available time. And good systems also compound. Once you build a system that works, it keeps working. It keeps producing value. Every hour you save with that system, every improvement in quality, it accumulates over time. And the initial investment might seem significant, but when you calculate the return over months and years, it's usually one of the best investments you can actually make. Systems don't get tired. They don't have off days. They just keep running in the background. So you can't scale yourself without tools and systems. There's only so much you can do manually, no matter how hard you work. And if you want to 10x your output or income, then you need leverage. You need systems that multiply your efforts. The investment in building those systems is what makes scaling actually possible. Without it, you hit the ceiling determined by your personal capacity and you stay stuck there forever. So the principle underlying all of this, the reason investing in yourself works so consistently, has to do with abundance versus scarcity. When you invest in yourself, you're operating from abundance. You're saying, I believe there's more money where this came from, and I believe in my ability to generate returns, and I believe I'm worth betting on. That mindset shift from scarcity to abundance changes everything about how you operate and what results you can actually create. Abundance thinking gives you different energy. You show up more confidently. You make bolder moves. You're not operating from fear or desperation, People pick up on that energy and they want to work with people who have it. Opportunities flow to people who demonstrate abundance rather than scarcity. The investment in yourself is a signal both to yourself and to others that you're operating from abundance. So you attract what you embody. And when you're in scarcity, pinching pennies, afraid to invest in yourself, you attract more scarcity. When you're in abundance, betting on yourself, investing confidently in your growth, you attract more abundance. This isn't some mystical, weird law. It's just that your behavior and energy when operating from abundance naturally lead to better outcomes. You take smarter risks, you pursue bigger opportunities, you expect success rather than bracing for failure. And what you put out really does come back to you in abundance. I've seen this pattern enough times now that I can't deny it. Whenever I make a significant investment in myself, the money just shows up from somewhere, sometimes immediately, sometimes over a few months, but it shows up multiplied. It's like the universe rewards the bet you place on yourself. Or maybe it's just psychology. Maybe the investment shifts something in how you operate that naturally leads to better results. Either way, the pattern holds. So learning to trust this principle changes your relationship with money entirely, right? You stop hoarding it out of fear. You stop making decisions from scarcity. You develop confidence that you can always make more, that investing in yourself is the best possible use of money since it increases your ability to generate more returns, right? That trust makes you more willing to actually take chances, to more willing to invest in opportunities, more willing to bet big on yourself. And once you experience this positive cycle a few times, it becomes self-reinforcing. You invest in yourself, you see returns, which gives you more resources to invest in yourself, which leads to bigger returns. The cycle accelerates and your growth compounds. Each investment makes the next investment both easier and more effective since you're building on a stronger foundation. And this is how people accelerate their growth exponentially rather than linearly. And this is how some businesses grow as well. So the investment is a commitment to yourself. It's you saying, I matter enough to invest in. My growth is worth spending money on, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to reach my potential. So that commitment is powerful in and of itself. It changes your self-concept. It shifts you from someone who hopes things will get better to someone who actively invests in making things better. And that shift in identity drives everything else. So with that said, let's discuss the value paradox. So most people consistently overestimate what they can actually accomplish in a short time frame. You look at your calendar, you've got 30 days ahead of you, and you set these massive goals. You make these ambitious plans, and then reality hits. A month goes by faster than you actually expected, and things take a bit longer than you actually thought. And you run into obstacles you didn't anticipate, and by the end of the month, you've maybe accomplished 70% of what you set out to do, and you feel like a failure. Look, a month is actually a pretty short period of time when you account for all the regular life stuff that has to happen. You still have to work, sleep, eat, handle responsibilities. You've got maybe a few hours a day of discretionary time if you're lucky. And when you factor in that most meaningful changes required consistent effort over time, a month is really just enough to build a habit, set the foundation, and make initial progress on something. So be patient in the short term while acting with speed, and be delusional in the long term. We want immediate results, and that's human nature. We see something we want to change and we want it fixed now. We want the business to be successful now. We want the body transformation now. We want the skill development now. That desire for immediate results makes us set crazy monthly goals and feel like failures when we don't get there. We compress timelines in our heads, assuming things will move faster than they actually do, and then we get discouraged when reality doesn't match our fantasy timeline. Look, the disappointment from missed monthly goals kills motivation. You worked hard for a month, you didn't hit the ambitious target you set, and now you feel defeated. That feeling makes it actually harder to keep pushing the next month. You start to doubt whether you can actually do this. You wonder if you're capable of achieving what you want. And the whole thing becomes a cycle of over-ambitious goal setting, followed by disappointment, followed by diminished motivation. Now, a year, though, is a completely different story. Most people wildly underestimate what they can actually accomplish in a year of focused, consistent effort. A year is actually a pretty long time when you're showing up every day, when you're making incremental progress, when you're learning and adjusting as you go. The amount of growth and change possible in 12 months is honestly staggering if you're actually putting in the work. So consistency over a year beats intensity over a month. Showing up for an hour a day for 365 days gets you way further than going all in for a month and then burning out. The daily practice compounds, the skills develop gradually, the results accumulate. Most people give up before they reach the 1 year mark though. And that's the problem. They sprint hard for a few weeks or months and don't see the dramatic results they actually expected. And then they quit before the compounding really kicks in. You can genuinely transform your life in a year. I'm talking about complete transformations. You can go from a beginner to a pretty competent person at a skill. You can build a meaningful side income. You can get in the best shape of your life. You can develop deep knowledge in a new field. The key is just having a monthly pace that you can actually sustain for 12 months rather than an unsustainable pace that burns you out in 6 weeks. And if people underestimate what's possible in a year, they really, really underestimate what's actually possible in 5 years. 5 years of consistent effort in any direction will take you so far that you'll barely recognize your starting point. You can become world-class at something in 5 years. You really can. You can build a substantial business. You can completely reconstruct your life. The distance you can travel in 5 years is almost unlimited if you're moving in the right direction consistently. And most people can't really think in 5-year timeframes. That's the problem. It feels too long, too abstract. They can sort of imagine a year from now. 5 years feels like forever though. So they don't actually plan for it. They don't set goals that far out. They don't commit to long-term paths that would require sustained effort over multiple years because they know they would have to put in the work for pretty long. And they stay stuck in short-term thinking, always looking for the quick win, never building towards something bigger that would actually take years to realize. And 5-year thinking requires patience that most people don't have. You're committing to a path knowing you won't see the full results for years. You're doing today's work for a payoff that's actually years away. And that delayed gratification goes against our own wiring. We want immediate feedback. We want immediate results, immediate validation that we're on the right path. The willingness to work for years towards a distant goal is pretty rare, which is why the people who do it end up in such different places than everyone else. 5 years gives compounding enough time to really work its magic, right? The first year you maybe make modest progress. The second year, you build on that progress. The third year, things start accelerating since you now have more skills, more knowledge, and more resources than when you started in the beginning. And by year 4 and 5, the growth is basically exponential. You're operating at a completely different level than you were at the start, but you only get that compounding if you stay on the path long enough. And where you'll be in 5 years if you stay focused on growth is so dramatically different from where you are now that it's hard to even imagine. The person you'll become, the capabilities you'll have, the life you'll be living, it's all potentially radically different. But you have to believe that transformation is actually possible. You have to trust the process for long enough to see it play out. And most people bail out after a year or two when they're right on the edge of the exponential growth phase. So 5 years is an investment time frame, not a sprint time frame. You're investing today's time and effort into future returns. You might not see much payoff in year 1 or 2, and that's okay. That's just the foundation building phase. The payoff comes later, and when it comes, it's substantial, but you have to be willing to invest without immediate returns, right? Which requires a level of delayed gratification and long-term thinking that's increasingly rare nowadays. And small changes in trajectory matter way more over 5 years than they do over 1 year. A tiny course correction today, a small habit change, a slightly different focus, it might not make much difference this month or even this year, but compound that small change over 5 years and you end up in a completely different place. This is why the decisions you make now matter so much even when their immediate impact seems so minimal. And here's where it gets really interesting though. The same people who underestimate what they can do in a year, they simultaneously overestimate how much value they're currently bringing to the table. They think they're already pretty good, already working pretty hard, already doing quality work, already learned enough. They just know everything and they have an inflated sense of their current contributions. And then when they don't get the recognition or compensation they think they actually deserve, they get resentful. And most people are pretty bad at assessing their own value accurately. You know your intentions, your effort, how hard you're actually working. You know all the changes you're dealing with that other people don't see. So in your own mind, you're doing great. You're working hard, you're contributing, you deserve more credit. But other people don't see your effort or intentions. They only see your output and results. And often there's a gap between how much effort you're putting in and how much value you're actually creating. And effort doesn't equal value. You can work incredibly hard and still produce mediocre results if you're working on the wrong things or using ineffective methods. And the market doesn't pay for effort, it pays for results. Otherwise, the richest people on earth would be the hardest working ones. So the market pays for results, for value created, for problems solved. Understanding this distinction is actually crucial because you might be working harder than everyone else, but if your output isn't correspondingly better, you're not creating more value. The effort is necessary, but it's not sufficient. So your standards might be lower than you think they are. What you consider good work might be average or even below average when compared to what's actually possible. And you're comparing yourself to your past self or to people around you who might also have mediocre standards. And when you haven't been exposed to truly excellent work, when you haven't seen what top performers in your field produce, you don't really realize where your work actually stands. And this is why getting feedback from people who are better than you is so valuable and so uncomfortable at the same time. People get really defensive when their self-assessment gets challenged. You think you're doing great work and someone points out ways you could actually improve, ways in which your work maybe falls short, and your immediate reaction is often defensiveness. You want to explain all the reasons why you did it that way, all the constraints you were working under, all the effort you put in, but that defensiveness is what prevents you from actually hearing the feedback and improving. It keeps you stuck in your current level of performance. And real feedback about your value is hard to get. Most people won't tell you the truth. They'll be polite. They'll say your work is actually fine. They'll give you vague encouragement. The market, though, gives you honest feedback. If you're struggling to get clients or employers at the rates you want, if opportunities aren't flowing to you, if you're not getting the recognition you think you deserve, that's actually the feedback. That's the market telling you your value isn't what you think it is. You can get mad about it or you can use it as information to improve. The gap between your self-assessment and reality can be painful to confront. Nobody wants to discover that they're not as good as they thought they were. It's ego bruising, basically. But that reality check is also incredibly valuable. Once you see the gap clearly, once you understand where you actually stand, you can do something about it. You can develop the skills you're lacking. You can raise your standards. You can close the gap between your current value and what you want your value to be. And here's the flip side, and this is what makes it a paradox. While people overestimate their current value, they massively underestimate their potential value. They think they're already pretty good, but they also think this is close to their ceiling. They don't realize how much room there is to grow, how much better they could become, how much more value they could create if they really pushed themselves. You're capable of way more than you think you are. Way more. And I know this sounds like a cliche, but it is true. The ceiling on your potential is probably 10 times higher than where you currently believe it is. You're operating at a fraction of your capacity. You could be twice as productive, twice as skilled, creating twice as much value if you're really committed to growth. The limitation isn't your inherent capability. The limitation is your belief about what's actually possible for you. You look at other people who are operating at high levels and you assume that they have something you don't, like a special talent or better circumstances or more resources. Sometimes that's true, but more often they just believe that they could reach that level and they put in the work to get there. They didn't have some magical advantage. They just had a higher belief about what was possible for them, and that belief drove the actions that created the results. You could do the same thing if you adjusted your beliefs about your own potential. Underestimating your potential is actually just comfortable in a weird way. If you believe you're close to your ceiling, you don't have to push harder. You don't have to learn more. You can coast at your current level and tell yourself that you're doing about as well as you're capable of doing. Admitting you could do way more, that your current performance is nowhere near your potential, that's uncomfortable because it creates a gap that we naturally want to close. It means you're leaving a lot on the table. It means you have no excuse for really staying where you are. And you're more valuable than you think. Right now, with your current skills and knowledge and experience, you're more valuable than you're giving yourself credit for. You've got capabilities that other people need. You've solved problems that other people are still struggling with. You've learned things that would help others. You're just not packaging it, not presenting it, and not putting yourself out there in the ways that would allow others to recognize and pay for that value. You're too close to your own knowledge and skills to see their value clearly. Things that seem obvious or easy to you are actually hard for most people. You've forgotten what it was like to not know what you know now. And you've internalized skills that are actually valuable in the marketplace. You discount your own expertise since you're intimately familiar with all the things you don't know. But the market doesn't compare you to perfection. It compares you to other people, many of whom know way less than you do. So you're probably undervaluing what you offer, you're charging less than you could, and you're not promoting yourself effectively. You're accepting opportunities that pay less than you're worth, and part of this is just imposter syndrome, and part of it is just not recognizing your own value. Part of it is fear of rejection, but the result is the same. You're leaving money on the table. You're not getting the opportunities you could get since you're underestimating your value and therefore underselling yourself. Perfectionism is one of the main things that keeps people from recognizing and expressing their full value. You think your work needs to be perfect before you can put it out there, before you can charge what it's worth, and before you can go for bigger opportunities. So you hold back. You tinker endlessly. You find flaws that need fixing, and you wait until everything is just right. Meanwhile, people with half your capability are out there making things happen since they're not paralyzed by perfectionism. Healthy standards are good. Perfectionism is something else entirely. Healthy standards mean you care about doing quality work. You have benchmarks you're trying to hit. You're not satisfied with sloppy results. Perfectionism means you're never satisfied and nothing is ever good enough. And you're always finding problems that need to be fixed before you can actually move forward. And that distinction matters. Standards drive you forward. Perfectionism typically keeps you stuck. Now, perfectionism is usually fear in disguise. You're afraid of being judged or afraid of failing or afraid of discovering you're not as good as you think you are. So you use perfectionism as protection. If you never declare something finished, if you never put it out there, you never have to face potential criticism or rejection. You get to stay safe, but you also stay stuck. You don't grow, you don't get feedback, you don't create value for others. And the returns on perfectionism are severely diminishing. Getting your work from 80% to 90% quality might be worthwhile. Getting it from 90% to 95% takes way more time for minimal improvement, and pushing from 95 to 98% takes even more time for even less improvement. Meanwhile, that time could be spent starting the next project, learning a new skill, creating more value. Perfectionism makes you spend time polishing things that are already good enough while missing opportunities to do more impactful work. And done is better than perfect in almost every situation. Done means you're shipping, you're putting work out into the world, you're getting feedback, you're making impact. Perfect means you're still tinkering, still holding back, still protecting yourself from judgment. The person who ships good work consistently beats the perfectionist who ships perfect work occasionally. Volume matters, iteration matters, getting feedback matters. All of that requires actually finishing and releasing things rather than endlessly refining them. And you learn way more from shipping imperfect work and getting feedback than from trying to perfect something in isolation. Real-world feedback tells you what actually matters, where the real problems are, what resonates with people. Your perfectionist polishing in isolation is often focused on things that don't actually matter to anyone but you. Ship it, learn from the response, improve the next variation, and that cycle is how you actually get better. Iteration beats perfection every time. Make something, ship it, learn from it, make the next version better, and that process gets you to excellent work way faster than trying to make the first version perfect. The first version is never perfect anyway, no matter how much time you actually spend on it. There are things you can only learn by shipping, by getting real feedback, by seeing how people actually use or respond to your work. Perfectionism delays that learning process indefinitely. And unhealthy expectations are the partner of perfectionism. You have these ideas about where you should be, what you should have achieved, how good your work should be. These expectations are often completely arbitrary and disconnected from reality. And maybe you're comparing yourself to people who are 10 years ahead of you. Maybe you're holding yourself to standards that nobody actually cares about. These expectations become chains that hold you back from making progress. Every time you hear yourself think, I should be further along or this should be better, that's an expectation talking. Question where that expectation actually comes from. Who says you should be further along? Based on what timeline? Compared to whom? Often these expectations are just internalized judgments, either from other people or from some imaginary standard that you've created. You're the creator of this. They're not based on any reasonable assessments of what's actually possible or what actually matters. Comparison is the thief of joy, as they say. When you're constantly comparing yourself to others, to where you think you should be, to some ideal standard, you're never satisfied with where you are. You can't appreciate your progress since you're too busy focusing on the gap between your current reality and your expectations. And that constant dissatisfaction actually prevents you from recognizing your value and building on your strengths. And most of your expectations are arbitrary. You decided you should be making an X amount by a certain age. You decided that your work should be at X quality level. You decided you should have achieved X by now, where did those decisions actually come from? Usually they're just numbers or standards you just picked up from somewhere and internalized without ever questioning them. And they're not based on your actual circumstances, your starting point, your unique path. Letting go of arbitrary expectations frees you to make progress on your actual path rather than constantly feeling like you're failing to live up to imaginary standards. And unhealthy expectations create constant pressure. You're always measuring yourself against the standard and finding yourself lacking. And that pressure doesn't actually motivate you to do better work. It actually paralyzes you. It makes you anxious and self-critical. It drains energy that could be going into actually creating value. And when you release those expectations, when you focus on simply doing good work and improving consistently, the pressure lifts. You can actually perform better since you're not carrying the weight of constantly feeling inadequate. And the wild thing is that most of these expectations are completely self-imposed. Nobody else is holding you to these standards. The pressure you're feeling isn't actually coming from external sources. You're doing it to yourself, which means you can also choose to stop. You can decide that your current pace is fine. You can decide that your current quality level is good enough for now. You can give yourself permission to be a work in progress rather than demanding that you already be finished. Because in reality, you're always going to be a work in progress. And if you're not, then you're probably doing it wrong. So releasing unhealthy expectations is incredibly freeing. You can stop beating yourself up for not being further along. You can appreciate where you actually are and the progress you've actually made. And you can focus your energy on creating rather than on self-criticism. And that freedom will allow you to operate at a higher level since you're not weighed down by constant judgment of yourself. So you have to unchain yourself from these limiting beliefs and expectations. You have to stop underestimating your potential while overestimating your current value. You have to drop the perfectionism that keeps you from shipping, and you have to release the arbitrary expectations that make you feel perpetually inadequate. All of these mental chains are keeping you from expressing the value you actually have and developing the value you're actually capable of creating. So give yourself permission to be where you are right now while also believing you can go much further. You don't have to be perfect today. You don't have to be as far along as you think you should be. Where you are right now is fine. And it's your starting point for the next phase of growth. You can acknowledge that you have room to improve, that your current value isn't your ceiling, without making that mean that you're inadequate right now. Both things can be true at the same time. So you're on a journey. Journeys have waypoints, not just destinations. Every point along the way is valid, and where you are now is a legitimate place to be. It's where you're supposed to be given your path so far. You'll be somewhere different next year and somewhere different 5 years from now. But trying to skip ahead, trying to be at the 5-year mark today, just creates suffering. Be here now, do the work that's right in front of you, and trust that consistent effort over time will get you where you actually want to go. Focus on the process rather than constantly evaluating whether you're good enough yet. Are you showing up consistently? Are you doing the work? Are you learning and improving? Are you shipping things? If you answer yes to those questions, then you're on the right path. The results will come. Your value will increase. Your capabilities will expand. But that all happens through the process, through the daily practice, through the consistent effort, through the boring work. The process is what you can actually control. Let go of trying to control the timeline or force the results. Your potential is way bigger than you think it is. You can create way more value than you're currently creating, and you can reach way higher than you're currently reaching. The main thing holding you back isn't a lack of talent or opportunity, it's your beliefs about what's possible for you, your perfectionism, your unhealthy expectations, your tendency to underestimate yourself. Remove those chains and see what happens. Bet on yourself. Push towards your actual potential rather than settling for the artificially limited version you've been accepting so far. So with that said, let's go over the review. We went over the overview, we talked about the sacred suffering, the infinite expansion, the wealth paradox, the self-investment law, the value paradox, the review, and finally your action items for the day or the next few days. First, stop running from hard work and start seeing it as the blessing it actually is. Find something difficult to pursue, something that scares you a little bit, and commit to the process of struggling towards it. Then make a significant investment in yourself this month. Anything. Take a course, hire a coach, buy some books, buy the tools you need, put real money on the line, and watch how it comes back multiplied. And then finally, let go of the perfectionism and the arbitrary expectations holding you back. Ship your work even when it's not perfect. Trust your potential. unchain yourself and see how far you can actually go. And with that being said, if you want this document along with this training, then make sure to join the free community from the first link in the description. And if you want to work with me personally one-on-one, especially if you're an entrepreneur, creator, or a professional, then make sure to book a call from the second link in the description. With that being said, thank you for being here, and I'm going to see you in the next one.